I was probably around 10 years old when this happened. My dad and I were driving down the road one afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. I remember looking out the window and seeing a large plane flying really low. If memory serves me right, it appeared really old and was maybe a military plane. We do have an Air Force base that's not far, so that would make sense. I remember being fascinated by the plane and excitedly pointing it out to my dad. He continued to drive while occasionally peeking over to look at it. After a few moments, the plane started to aggressively swerve like the pilot was losing control. Not long after, it nosedived and flew into a patch of nearby trees. I remember my dad panicking and pulling his truck over to the side of the road. We just sat there and looked out the window, but there was nothing. There was no sound of any kind, no smoke or fire, nothing. The trees didn't rustle and everything was calm. We waited, thinking that the plane was going to swerve back up and fly away, but it never emerged. I remember asking him what happened, and he was just silent. After a bit, he started driving again, and we drove over the area. We drove around for probably an hour trying to find some explanation, but there was nothing. Eventually, we headed back to my grandmother's place. We had dinner and explained to her what had happened, but she probably just thought we were crazy. I remember us eager to turn on the evening news to see if there was any mention, but still nothing. Also nothing in the paper the next day. There was no real internet yet, so this was all we had. To this day, my dad and I still discuss this. The one thing we can't remember is if the plane was making any sound at all while it was flying in the air. The radio might have been on or the windows up, we can't remember. We know for certain there was no sound from the crash. It was only about a half-mile away from us, so we would have heard something. It is like the plane literally vanished. This is the only experience I've ever had like this. I know it's a long shot, but has anyone here ever experienced something like this? I've never shared this in a public forum, so hopefully I don't appear completely crazy. There is a great comfort in knowing my dad saw the same thing. Otherwise, I would think I imagined it. This happened a long time ago. I was 12 and in my grandparents' village. We had a cow and an ox. Usually the son of the bull, usually just one, took all the cattle to graze, and at night he would take them back. Cows know where to go when going home. My grandpa had a male ox, and since my father was an adult and he wasn't there, I took the responsibility. Basically, my job was to go around the village with the ox trailing after me, calling the people to open their doors. Our ox would grunt to call the herd, and all the females came out. From then on, I had to take them to a clearing up the mountain and then later take them to the river. It was easy. The animals already knew where they were going. They were calm, and our bull was a gentle giant. All I did was ride him and had a thin rope on his horns. If any of the females wandered off, all I did was call and rare occasions poke her with the doll stick in the right direction. My grandpa said that if I see a wolf, very rare, a boar or a fox, I should stay on the ox. Not many animals dare go near an ox herd. There is a dark part of the forest where it is very quiet and even the bravest hunters won't go. It is very slippery and dangerous. They said that even the deer and boar dare not go there. I was forbidden to go there and honestly never wanted to. It was an early morning and everything seemed fine. I was on the ox going up the mountain. I was glad he let me because it was a hard trek up. I saw that one of the females was wandering off. I followed her and left our ox and the dogs go to guide the herd. She went in the forest. I ran to her and got untying the rope on her horns. I tried steering her away, but she continued. She went in the dark part and stopped. I didn't want to get off in case she ran back and left me there. I heard a crunch and turned. A very old man was walking towards us. He looked frail with dirty clothes and a long beard. I was scared, so I laid on the ox, clinging to her, not wanting to fall if she ran. Oxen aren't like bulls. They don't jump and kick when scared. They either attack with their horns and trample or run. I was ready to hold on no matter what she chose. Our oxen don't take kindly to strangers. Before I took them out, I had to go to every house and have the ox owner introduce me to the animal. That way they saw that their owner trusts me and their herd leader, our ox, trusts me. I knew she would either attack or bolt, but she just stood there. The stranger came to us and pet her on her head, whispering something I didn't understand. He looked at me. His eyes were completely white. Then he turned around and left. He just disappeared into the trees. Suddenly, the female grunted as if they had just woken up. Our male does this noise every morning and bolted the way we came from. We found the herd. I quickly got on our ox and yelled water. He knew that command and went down towards the river. There were houses there and it was closer than home. I barged in one of the houses and tried to explain. The couple there stayed with me and sent their daughters to call my grandpa. I couldn't sleep for days remembering those white eyes. My grandparents didn't let me out of the house for gardening, and I wasn't allowed near the trees. Later I learned that they were protecting me from a lesnik, a forest spirit which can take the form of a man, an owl, or a wolf. It hates when people go in his part of the woods and can kidnap you. I later learned that the auk which took me there had fallen ill and died. It sometimes stays in the trees as an owl looking for the offender. For years, when I went to my grandparents, they wouldn't let me be alone. Not just outside, but inside too. I am never going in these woods again. My father passed when I was 6 years old and had been sick for 2 years prior to passing, so I had very few precious memories of him. My mom would fill in these things here and there, stories of him and his adventurous soul as I got older. I was the youngest by far of 4 girls, so I was the only one that didn't know him well. Maybe because of those questions and stories, I kind of heard things about him the other sisters didn't know of his past. One story told me when I was around 15 or so, laughingly during a "have you ever had any paranormal events happen to you" kind of thing. She repeated this to me a time or two later as well. My father, her and my eldest sister, who was 1 year old, was living in an old house in some state. This was the early 1960s. House was isolated. Well, there was a reported prison break nearby, so my mom expected he was worried and led to this event. That night he sat up in bed, wide awake, and said, "Ethel," and woke her up. She was alarmed because he was so still and staring at the foot of the bed. "What?" she said. "Did you see them?" he whispered. His eyes were steady and wide. He didn't look asleep. He wasn't prone to do anything like sleepwalking or talking in his sleep. "See what?" "There are 3 little green men at the foot of the bed staring at me." Well, there wasn't, of course. She snorted, and she told him no, there wasn't. He said that they were just staring at him, and then he said they were gone. Lasted about 2 minutes. Now, my father had a few events happen in his life that had been weird, but my mom and I never. So that was a funny dad story to me, and we laughed. The 3 little green men. Now, fast forward, my son is 11 years old and very sick with bronchial asthma. He has had so many bouts of this all of his young life, and this one to me was slightly worse than others. A visit to the hospital, breathing treatments, a fever. About 2 months later, we were chatting and he said, "Yeah, I thought I was going to die that night, Mom." "You weren't that bad off, sweetie," I said. Very seriously, he said, "I thought I was, mostly when I saw the 3 little green men. They were beside the bed just staring at me. One was playing the drums." All I could do was look at him. My mouth gaped. He knew nothing of his grandfather's story. I called my mom and told her, and she was just as flabbergasted as I was. My son is now in his 30s and nothing else has happened, but he has sons and I'm keeping my ears open.